So here I have in the studio with me Hakam Yair Davidiy. Could you introduce your organization to my audience for us again, please, Yair?
Our organization is known as Brit-Am, B-R-I-T dash Am, A-M, Brit-Am, literally meaning a covenant of the people, Brit-Am, Hebrew awareness. And we, in principle, we search for the lost end tribes. We find the lost end tribes amongst Western nations.
Very good. So the lost 10 tribes among the Western nations.
Yes.
And any other? Do you deal with any of the other Hebrew branches as well? Like, for example, Ishmael or Edom as branches of the greater Hebrew family or the broader Hebrew family?
Yes, we do. We have articles on the subject. We even wrote books on the subject concerning some of them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what we concentrate upon, and that is not what we consider ourselves to be so authoritative about. Authoritative, mm-hmm. In other words, we haven't researched them at the same level, the same depth as we have mm-hmm. the main theme.
Okay, so your main focus is on specifically the lost tribes of Israel, then the lost yes. peoples of Israel, yes. And you've identified several places which are maybe the hot spots, if you like. Can you name them off the top of your head?
Yes, we find the lost end tribes to be find them to be amongst Western nations, especially Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, France, Belgium, Switzerland, the British Isles, Scotland, England, Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland, also the offshoots of the British overseas, North America, Canada, America, the USA, Australia, New Zealand. That is where we find most of the lost end tribes to be. We don't say that everyone in those regions is descended from lost end tribes. We understand that in those areas, the lost end tribes are concentrated as recognizable entities, and they are there. That is where they are to be found.
Okay. And do we know is there a kind of a specific group of tribes that we're talking about here in Europe? Is it all of the tribes or specifically, say, Dan or Ephraim or
Yes,
Manasseh?
Yes, we identify, as we said, you had 12 tribes of Israel, 12 different tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And the 10 tribes, 10 of the northern tribes separated from the southern tribes. They separated from the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. And so Judah and Benjamin became the foundational basis, became the foundational tribes of what became the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. Judah and Benjamin. Afterwards, Judah was joined by most of the tribe of Levi. Previously, Levi had been scattered throughout all the other tribes. It was a tribe of priests. But when the northern tribes began to worship pagan gods and so on, and when things changed amongst the northern tribes, the tribe of Levi moved to the south. Also, in the course of time, refugees and others came from the north to the south. So the Jewish people are a mixture of all the tribes, but the dominant tribes amongst the Jewish people are Levi, Benjamin, and Judah, especially Judah. They're named after Judah. That's where the name Judah comes from. Judah is derived from the name. Jew is derived from the name Judah. But you had the northern tribes, and northern tribes were separate, and we find these northern peoples amongst the Western nations. For instance, we find in Finland we find a predominance of the tribe of Issachar. In Sweden, of the tribe of Gad.
Mm-hmm.
In Norway, of the tribe of Naphtali. In Dan, of the tribe of Dan. In Denmark, of the tribe of Dan. In the Netherlands, of the tribe of Zebulun. In France, of the tribe of Reuben. And in the British Isles, we find the predominance of the tribes of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh,
mm-hmm.
as well as others, the tribe of Asher in Ireland, and also in Wales, and throughout the British Isles, we find representatives of all the tribes, but the tribes of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh were dominated there.
In the British Isles? In
the British Isles, yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they founded the USA, they founded Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. They also gave different input into those regions.
Mm-hmm. We've had also. Are you? I mean, do you only focus mostly on Europe and sort of the European diaspora, or what about other groups like the Bnei Menashe from East, like Assam, parts of India, and the Lemba in Africa? And what about there's a huge number of Sephardim.
So, okay, so you asked about the Lemba in Africa, and also you asked about the people in Burma, Bnei Menashe,
yeah.
called Bnei Menashe. Yes.
And also, yes, and also the sort of diaspora of the Anusim, they were also called conversos or Maranos.
Yeah, the Maranos.
Yes, yes.
The Anusim.
Yes, yes. So how much do you know about this other parts of the world as well, apart from the European diaspora?
So I don't know that much about them. I don't know that much about the Anusim. The other, we don't believe that the people in Burma, we do not believe that they belong to the church, that they descend from the tribes of Israel. Also, the same with the Lemba. There may be Jews amongst them, there may be others amongst them, they may have some type of contact with the Israelites at some stage or other. We don't know, or even if we do know, we do not identify them, the lost tribes of Israel. The Anusim, the Maranos, we find them, they are different. They are related, they are offshoots from the tribe of Judah. The Anusim are mainly people in Spain or in Spanish possessions. Mm-hmm. And when the Spaniards in 1492 expelled all of the Jews from Spain, and afterwards the people of the Gentiles of Portugal also expelled all the Jews from their nation. So many left, but others stayed. A lot of them converted to Christianity. They were forced to. They were under enormous pressure. In Portugal, all their children were taken away from them. And so they converted. But even though they converted to Christianity, they retained some identification with the Jewish people. But they were persecuted for doing so they had to keep it secret. And very often they intermarried amongst themselves. So in some regions, there were whole villages of people of this type. Mm-hmm. But whereas others intermixed with the locals, but you find them throughout Latin America, Mexico, Brazil, all over the place. You find people who are descendants of the Conversos, also Cuba, mm-hmm. And also many of them also are to be found in the southern USA. Many of them came to the USA. Also, some of them eventually migrated to England, and then they announced their Jewish ancestry. Others did the same in Holland and the Netherlands. And so they exist. They are known. Many of them returned to Judaism, but some did not. Eventually, they should do so, but there's a halakhic problem. Some of them is a problem that after 3 generations, according to Jewish tradition, they're not considered Jewish. It's as if their Judaism has been suspended. And this is a similar ruling concerning the lost 10 tribes. Even if we know 100% that the ancestors of a certain person are descended from Israel, if they have disconnected themselves from the Jewish religion for more than 3 generations, and a de facto level, usually they are required to convert to Judaism if they want to reassociate themselves with the Jewish people.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So if you have maternal line is Jewish. So let's imagine first step. Your mother is Jewish, or she was born Jewish. She didn't convert to another religion, but she didn't bring you up as a Jew. And you don't know that you're a Jew because you don't know your mother's Jewish. At this point, you're still Jewish.
Okay, so this is a hypothetical situation, and exists. It exists. It's quite frequent.
Yeah.
For instance, I read in a Jewish magazine a true story a few decades ago about when there was problems in Poland, when the outbreaks of anti-Semitism in Poland, and there was a certain school where the two brothers in this Polish school were beating up and tormenting the Jewish students. So the headmaster called their parents in for a consultation, and he said, you have to do something about this. He told them what they were doing. So the parents then said, so we realized our mistake. We have to tell them that they're also Jewish. We never told them until now. So you have this phenomena. So in such a case, if the person receives information that his parents were Jewish, even if they changed their religion, but he receives this information that they were Jewish. So the first thing he should do is contact a Jewish Orthodox rabbi, and these rabbis, a lot of them are very pleasant people. They're informative, they're resourceful, they're user-friendly, as if to say. You have exceptions on the whole. They're quite. It can be a very pleasant experience, a pleasing experience, and they're well informed, as I said. And it's best to consult them. In general, on the whole, such a person will be advised to associate themselves with the Jewish people. If they have any proof that the documentary evidence or any anecdotal evidence, any proof that they are Jewish, and they can prove that they're Jewish, that will help them a lot. If they lack proof, so then other solutions will be found. They might have to convert or be advised to convert. I can't say each case is an individual case, and it also depends upon the rabbinical authorities who they're dealing with and the situation. But in general, that's my impression.
So the next step then is so I'm going to go down the three levels. So the first step is your mother was Jewish, but she doesn't practice. You were brought up secular. You didn't know that you were Jewish because anti-Semitic situation, like you described in Poland. And then you discover you're Jewish, and then you go to the rabbinical authorities, and it could be a very easy process to reconnect. The next step is that in the same scenario, but this time the child grows up not knowing that they're Jewish. Maybe they think they're atheists or agnostic or secular people. They don't know. They don't have any religion. And then say that's a girl, and then she has a daughter. So then her daughter is the second generation, unaware about her Jewishness, and then she may discover her Jewishness from her mother's side, and then go to the rabbinical authorities. The situation would be pretty much the same as the first generation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
It would be, but there's a problem if she takes some other religion, because it happens. People are religious by nature.
Yeah.
So if she adopts even for another religion, so that it introduces a complication. If she might have to. She might have to convert. If the rabbis believe that she is Jewish, but they just want to be extra strict, so the conversion process should be relatively easy. If they are doubtful, they might ask her to hang around, to move into a neighborhood, to become associated with Jews, and they just want to have what you could say a trial period. This happens a lot. They ask a person to move into a Jewish neighborhood or a place where they can get to Jewish lessons, to come to attend their lectures, to associate themselves with Jews, and then the rabbis get to know them, and then the rabbis use their experience with the person, their association with the person, to make their decision.
Now, let's talk about the third generation. Now, so in the third generation, from the first, the first Jewish mother who was born Jewish, her parents are Jewish, but she didn't grow up practicing Judaism. Then her child didn't grow up practicing Judaism. Then that girl's child converted to a different religion. Then that girl's daughter, then she's the third generation. In this situation, we talked earlier about the Jewishness being cancelled after 3 generations. So is she in that condition where it's cancelled, or does the cancelling only begin from the point where they have adopted a new religion?
As I understand it,
Yep.
Also, you have a de facto, what they do in practice and what the regulations are. Okay, yeah. So In some cases, the rabbis might be able to accept them, might not. In most situations like that, they would require them to at least go through a formal conversion. A formal conversion means that they go before a court, so they believe in Judaism, they're prepared to accept the law of the Bible as the rabbis explain it, and to have a ritual immersion in a mikvah. And if they're male, they have to undergo circumcision.
Right. So this is kind of like still at the Gyur L'Chumra sort of level, the conversion of stringency.
Yes, yeah.
Gyur L'Chumra. Now, so when does what I'm trying to understand is when does the rule concerning the three generations sort of kick in? Does it kick in from the third generation not being brought up Jewish, or is it only the third generation after the conversion from the mother or the ancestor who converted out of Judaism? When does this three generations rule? Do you know about it?
No. All I can say is that I saw in the Shulchan Aruch, I saw in the book of law, Jewish law, this ruling, and I understand that it is in effect. I also understand something of interest. Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, the previous Prime Minister of Israel. You heard of him, Yair Davidiy Netanyahu. He's famous.
Yes.
He's for a long time, and he might well be soon the Prime Minister of Israel again. So he's very well known. And his father was a renowned historian. He was a great historian, and his speciality was the Jews of Spain. And he wrote several volumes with thick detailed appendices about the Jews of Spain. He also wrote a biography of Abarbanel, who was one of the great Jews of Spain, one of the great Jewish sages in Spain. And he knew his material very well. And in an appendix of his, an adjunct to one of his volumes, he goes into great detail on this very subject, because the Marranos, they said they knew some, they were very important in Spanish history, Jewish Spanish history. People who had been forced, or for some reason they had converted to Judaism because the Spanish were forcing them to do so, pressuring them to do so, but they still retained some adherence to Judaism, and then they fled from Spain and came to places like North Africa or Holland or different areas like that, and they wanted to become Jewish again. What happened to them? How were they treated by the local authorities? And so he brings a lot of response, questions and answers on this subject, and he analyzes it. And he says that in the beginning, the rabbis tended to be very lenient on this issue, but then through their experience, they became more and more strict about it. So that more or less sums up the situation today.
As time goes by,
the rabbis will be strict. The rabbis will be strict in their rulings. They might be relatively lenient in how they apply them. In other words, they might insist that the person convert, but if they're lucky, they won't require them to go through a whole drawn-out process of hanging around, of going to lectures and going before interviews and so on. They might just make sure that they know enough to get by and convert them on the spot. You can never tell.
You cannot tell.
But the rabbis also have to be careful, because everything they do is recorded. They make records themselves, and if they're not strict enough, they will be in trouble with their peers. So there's minimum standards that are maintained.
There are minimum standards. My situation, I actually had to go through a Gyur L'Chumra. But I went through Gyur L'Chumra because I was interested in marrying somebody from Eda Charedit. And so my Jewishness might have been orthodox enough for what we like call a conservadox community, but not for Eda Charedit.
You probably know more about it than I do.
Just a little. So I had to go through the Gyur L'Chumra for that. In the end, I didn't end up marrying her, but I still did the Gyur L'Chumra. So I'm under Eda Charedit, but I'm actually from a different minhag originally. But it was an Ashkenazi minhag that did the Eda Charedit Gyur L'Chumra for me. Very simple process, basically an interview. It took maybe 10, 15 minutes. Then I went to the mikvah. The rabbi was there. His name was Dov Meir Stein of the German community in Jerusalem. And he took me down to the mikveh. There were two other men in the mikveh as witnesses. Splushed me in the water. Did you take upon your shoulders all the mitzvot of Hatorah? Yes. I think it was, how many times was that? Maybe 3 or 7 times. I said that. And then afterwards, that was it. I was officially recognized in the Eda Haradit after that. So that's how that happened. I'm going to break this one, and we'll have a second interview right now, mainly because this Zoom meeting only gives me 40-minute interviews with you. So I'm going to send you another link right now, Yair. And we'll talk a little bit more about more Hebrew tribes and the conversion process. So thank you so much for joining us for this show. We'll just end this one, and we'll come back a little bit later with another one.